Michael Bennett was a man who had everything, or so the world thought. In the rainy glass and steel skyline of Seattle, his name was synonymous with power, a tech mogul who had built an empire alongside his best friend and partner, Daniel Carter. But Michael's true pride wasn't in his bank account. It was in the quiet halls of his mansion, in the laughter of his 8-year-old son Ethan and his 5-year-old daughter Lily, and in the serene beauty of his wife Laura, who was now 7 months pregnant with their 3rd child. Life was a perfect algorithm, a series of successful lines of code, until a routine genetic screening for the new baby revealed a glitch that didn't make sense. Michael, a man of data and logic, investigated in silence. He reviewed medical records, cross-referenced lab results, and finally, he did the one thing he never thought he'd have to do. He tested himself. The diagnosis was a cold, hard binary, congenital infertility. Michael had been sterile since birth. He could never have biological children. In an instant, the foundation of his world vanished. Ethan wasn't his, Lily wasn't his, and the life growing inside Laura was a stranger's. The truth was even more jagged. The father was Daniel, the man he called brother. When Michael confronted Laura, there were no screams, no dramatic pleas for forgiveness. She simply looked at him with a chilling calculation, packed her bags while the children slept, and walked out of the house to join Daniel in the life she had been planning in the shadows. Michael was left standing in a palace of lies, holding the pieces of a broken heart. But as he looked at the empty rooms, he realized something that changed everything. The children were still there. They were the only real things left in a world of ghosts. To keep a sense of normalcy for Ethan and Lily, Michael started a new, humble routine. Every afternoon, they stopped at the Brooklyn Diner, a place far removed from the velvet ropes of his previous life. It was there he met Sarah Miller, a waitress who had been working the double shift for 3 years. Sarah was direct, practical, and carried a natural kindness that couldn't be faked. To the rest of Seattle, Michael was a fallen king, but to Sarah, he was just the tired father who ordered his coffee black and sat in the corner booth watching his kids. Sarah knew the details that actually mattered. She knew Ethan hated pickles and that Lily liked her hot chocolate lukewarm so she wouldn't burn her tongue. Slowly, a silent bridge began to form between them. Sarah would help Lily with her math homework when Michael was caught in a late meeting, or she'd listen to Ethan talk about dinosaurs with a genuine interest that made the boy beam. Michael watched her, and for the first time in months, he felt like he could breathe. He began to see Sarah not just as a waitress, but as a woman who understood the weight of staying when things got hard. She was raising her teenage brother alone, working herself to the bone, yet she carried a serenity that Michael found intoxicating. She didn't care about his billions. She cared about the way he tucked his daughter's hair behind her ear. Their connection wasn't a whirlwind romance. It was a slow, steady construction of trust. One afternoon at school, Lily's teacher gave the class a simple assignment. Write about your family. Lily stared at the blank page, her pencil frozen, her eyes filling with tears. When the teacher asked what was wrong, Lily whispered that family was the word her mother used before she left, and now she didn't know what to write. The teacher knelt beside her and said that family isn't a mold you're born into. It's the people who stay, the ones who listen, the ones who don't walk away. Lily thought about her father, she thought about Ethan, and she thought about Sarah at the diner, who always knew when she was sad before she even spoke. Lily started to draw. She drew Michael in the center, Ethan on one side, and Sarah on the other, wearing her blue apron and holding Lily's hand. 4 figures, one complete family, built not on blood, but on the simple logic of a child who knew that family is whoever shows up. When the teacher handed the drawing to Michael, he held it for a long time, the paper trembling in his hands. The following week, Lily and Ethan brought the drawing to Sarah. She looked at it, her eyes misting over, and asked if she could keep it. Lily just smiled, as if there had never been a doubt. Michael watched from a distance, and in that moment, the void inside him finally began to close. His bond with Sarah deepened through shared coffees after her shift and quiet conversations in the parking lot under the Seattle rain. Sarah was cautious, knowing the weight of entering a life that had been so violently shattered, but Michael proved himself with every honest gesture. He told her he didn't want to replace what was lost. He wanted to build something entirely new, something built on the truth. Meanwhile, the life Laura had chased with Daniel began to rot from the inside. Without Michael's empire to sustain them, their passion turned to resentment. Daniel, ruined and abandoned by the very woman he had betrayed his best friend for, eventually found himself at Michael's door. He asked for forgiveness, a broken man looking for a way back into a world he had burned down. Michael didn't offer a grand gesture of mercy, but he listened. He told Daniel that while the children shared his DNA, they shared Michael's soul, and that was a bond no biology could ever break. He told Daniel to go and be a father to the new baby, to try and find the strength to stay for once. The story of Michael Bennett isn't one of quick fixes or easy endings. He still has days where the betrayal stings, and Sarah is still learning how to occupy the space in a life she never expected to join. Ethan and Lily don't know the full truth of their origin, but they know the only truth that matters. They are loved by the man who chose to be their father. In the end, it's about the man who stayed when he had every reason to leave. It's about the woman who walked into a wreckage and decided to help rebuild. And it's about a family that was found in the most unlikely of places, proving that the strongest ties aren't written in our genetic code, but in the choices we make every single day. The rain in Seattle has a way of washing away the surface, revealing the raw, jagged edges of what lies beneath. For Michael Bennett, the rain was a constant companion during those first few months of isolation. He had spent his entire life building structures that were meant to last, software that never crashed, companies that never folded, a marriage that was supposed to be his sanctuary. But as he sat in his darkened study, the only light coming from the glowing screens of his past achievements, he realized that he had been an architect of illusions. The genetic report sat on his desk, a thin stack of paper that had more power than any board of directors. It told him that his bloodline ended with him, a biological dead end. But as he looked at the photos of Ethan and Lily, he saw something the report couldn't capture. He saw the way Ethan furrowed his brow when he was thinking, a habit he had picked up from Michael. He saw the way Lily laughed at her own jokes, a mirror of Michael's own sense of humor. These weren't genetic traits, they were the imprints of a soul. Michael realized that while he hadn't provided the blueprints for their bodies, he had provided the foundation for their characters, and that foundation was built on love, not DNA. The betrayal by Daniel Carter was a wound that refused to close. Daniel had been more than a business partner. He had been the brother Michael never had. They had shared everything. Late nights in the garage coding their first app, the adrenaline of their first IPO, the quiet celebrations of their successes. To find out that Daniel had been systematically dismantling Michael's personal life while smiling to his face was a level of cruelty that Michael couldn't comprehend. It wasn't just the affair, it was the decade of deception. Every birthday party, every holiday dinner, every Uncle Daniel moment had been a calculated lie. Daniel hadn't just taken Michael's wife. He had attempted to steal Michael's legacy. But as Michael watched Daniel's life begin to unravel from afar, he felt a strange sense of pity. Daniel had the biological connection, but he had none of the history. He had the genes, but he had none of the memories. Daniel was a man who had won the battle, but lost the war for what truly matters. Laura's departure was a surgical strike. She had always been a woman of precision, and her exit was no different. She didn't leave a note, she left a void. She didn't take the children, not because she didn't love them in her own twisted way, but because they were reminders of a life she was desperate to escape. They were the baggage that didn't fit into the new, sleek life she envisioned with Daniel. For Laura, the children were assets that had depreciated in value once the truth was out. Michael, however, saw them as his only remaining treasure. He stepped into the role of a single father with a desperation that bordered on obsession. He learned how to braid Lily's hair, how to talk Ethan through his anxieties about school, and how to cook meals that didn't come out of a box. He traded the boardroom for the kitchen, and in doing so, he found a version of himself that was far more resilient than the tech mogul the world knew. The Brooklyn Diner became his cathedral. It was a place where the air was thick with the smell of grease and the sound of everyday struggles. It was the antithesis of the sterile, high-tech world he had inhabited. And in the center of it all was Sarah. She was a woman who had been forged in the fires of reality. She didn't have the luxury of illusions. Her life was a series of shifts, bills, and the constant responsibility of her younger brother, Leo. When Michael first started coming in, she saw right through his expensive turno and his haunted eyes. She didn't see a billionaire, she saw a man who was drowning. And instead of offering him a life jacket, she showed him how to swim. She didn't pity him, she respected him for showing up. She saw the way he looked at his children, and she knew that whatever had happened to him, he was a man of substance. Their conversations were short at first, exchanges about the menu or the weather, but they carried a weight that Michael's previous social interactions lacked. Sarah spoke with a blunt honesty that was both jarring and refreshing. She told him about the time she had to choose between paying the electricity bill or buying Leo new shoes. She told him about the dreams she had deferred to keep her family afloat. Michael listened, and for the first time in his life, he felt a connection that wasn't based on what he could provide, but on who he was. Sarah was the first person to see the man behind the empire, and she was the first person to tell him that the man was enough. The drawing Lily made at school was the turning point. It was a simple piece of art, but it carried the weight of a manifesto. When Lily showed it to him, Michael saw a future he hadn't dared to imagine. He saw a family that wasn't defined by the past, but by the present. He saw Sarah not as a temporary fixture in their lives, but as a cornerstone. The fact that Lily had included her in the drawing was a testament to the quiet impact Sarah had made on their hearts. She hadn't tried to replace Laura, she had simply filled the empty spaces with her presence. She had become the person Lily turned to when she needed a woman's perspective, and the person Ethan looked to for a laugh. Sarah had become the mother they needed, not by right of birth, but by right of action. When Michael finally worked up the courage to ask Sarah out on a real date, he was terrified. He was a man who had negotiated billion-dollar deals, yet his hands shook as he waited for her answer. Sarah didn't say yes immediately. She looked at him with that characteristic intensity and asked him if he was ready for the reality of her life. She told him that she wasn't a trophy wife and that her brother Leo was part of the package. Michael smiled, a genuine, soul-deep smile, and told her that he wouldn't have it any other way. He told her that he was done with trophies and illusions. He wanted the mess, the struggle, and the truth. Their first date wasn't at a five-star restaurant. It was a walk through the park, followed by pizza at a local joint. They talked until the stars were the only things left in the sky, and Michael realized that he had finally found what he had been searching for his entire life, a partner who saw him, flaws and all, and chose to stay. The downfall of Daniel and Laura was as predictable as it was tragic. They had built their relationship on a foundation of betrayal, and it was only a matter of time before the cracks began to show. Without Michael's resources to buffer them, the reality of their situation became overwhelming. Daniel wasn't the provider Laura thought he was, and Laura wasn't the supportive partner Daniel had imagined. They were two people who had destroyed a family to find happiness, only to realize that happiness can't be stolen. It has to be earned. When Daniel finally came to Michael's office, he was a shell of the man he once was. He looked at Michael and saw a man who had lost everything but gained his soul. Michael's refusal to destroy Daniel further wasn't an act of forgiveness, it was an act of closure. He didn't need to punish Daniel. Daniel was doing a fine job of that himself. Michael's focus was on the future, on the family he was building with Sarah, Ethan, and Lily. He had realized that the best revenge was living a life that was honest, full, and real. As the years passed, the story of the Bennett family became one of legend in their small circle. They weren't the perfect family the world once saw, but they were a whole one. Michael and Sarah eventually married in a quiet ceremony on the coast, with Ethan as the best man and Lily as the flower girl. Leo, now a young man with a bright future, stood by Michael's side as a brother. They were a patchwork family, a collection of souls who had found each other in the aftermath of a storm. Michael never forgot the pain of the past, but he used it as a compass to guide him toward the truth. He realized that the 15,000 characters of his life story weren't written in his genes, but in the moments he spent with the people who chose to stay. He was the man who had been told he could never be a father, yet he was the most devoted father anyone had ever known. He was the man who had lost his empire, but found his home. And in the end, that was the only legacy that mattered. The rain still falls in Seattle, but for Michael Bennett, it no longer feels like a cold, isolating force. It feels like a cleansing, a reminder that even the deepest wounds can heal if you have the right people by your side. He looks at Sarah, he looks at his children, and he knows that he is exactly where he is supposed to be. He is a man who found the truth in the wreckage, and in doing so he found a love that is truly unbreakable. The story of Michael Bennett is a testament to the power of choice, the resilience of the human spirit, and the enduring truth that family is defined by the heart, not the blood. It is a story for anyone who has ever felt lost, betrayed, or broken, a reminder that even when the world falls apart, you can still find the pieces that matter and build something even more beautiful than before. This is the legacy of the man who stayed, the woman who helped him rebuild, and the children who taught them both what it means to truly be a family. And as the sun sets over the Seattle skyline, Michael Bennett finally knows what it means to be a man who has everything. The journey from the sterile halls of his tech empire to the warm, grease-scented booths of the Brooklyn diner was more than just a change in scenery. It was a migration of the soul. Michael had spent decades optimizing systems, but he had never optimized his own heart. He had been a man who lived in the future, always looking for the next breakthrough, the next acquisition, the next milestone. But the betrayal forced him into the present, into the raw, unvarnished reality of a life that couldn't be solved with an algorithm. He learned that the most important things in life are the ones you can't measure, the weight of a child's hand in yours, the shared silence of a partner who understands your pain, the quiet satisfaction of a day spent being present. Sarah was the catalyst for this transformation. She didn't just offer him a place to eat, she offered him a place to be. She challenged him to look at his life through a different lens, to see the value in the struggle and the beauty in the mundane. She taught him that a life well lived isn't about avoiding the storms, but about learning how to dance in the rain. And as Michael watched his children grow, he saw the fruits of that lesson. Ethan became a young man of deep empathy and intellect, a reflection of the man Michael had become. Lily became a woman of fierce independence and kindness, a mirror of the woman Sarah was. They were the living proof that a family built on choice is just as strong, if not stronger, than one built on biology. The truth of their origin was eventually shared with them, not as a secret to be ashamed of, but as a testament to the depth of Michael's love. He told them that he had chosen them, and that choice was the most important thing he had ever done. They understood, with the wisdom that only children of a broken home can possess, that their father was the man who had been there for every fever, every heartbreak, and every triumph. They knew that Michael was their father in every way that counted. The legacy of Michael Bennett isn't found in the software that still bears his name, but in the lives of the people he loved. It's found in the laughter that fills his home, the trust that defines his marriage, and the resilience that he passed on to his children. He is a man who was tested by the most profound betrayal and emerged not with bitterness, but with a deeper capacity for love. He is a man who proved that the strongest ties are the ones we weave ourselves with threads of honesty, commitment, and grace. And as he sits on his porch, watching the rain fall over the city he once conquered, he knows that he has finally achieved the only success that matters. He is a man who is loved not for what he has, but for who he is. And that is a story that will last far longer than any empire. The final chapters of Michael's life were marked by a profound sense of peace. He had navigated the darkest waters and found his way to a shore that was more beautiful than he could have ever imagined. He and Sarah spent their golden years traveling, not to the luxury resorts of his past, but to the places that held meaning for them. They visited the small towns where Sarah had grown up, the parks where they had walked during their early days, and the quiet corners of the world where they could just be themselves. They were two souls who had found their home in each other, and that was enough. The children, now grown with families of their own, were a constant presence in their lives. Michael saw the same love and commitment in their eyes that he had tried to model for them. He saw his grandchildren playing in the same rain that had once felt so cold, and he smiled. He knew that the cycle of love and choice would continue, a legacy that would outlast him by generations. He had been the man who stayed, and in doing so, he had changed the course of his family's history. He had proven that even the most devastating betrayal can be the beginning of a new, more beautiful story. And as he closed his eyes for the final time, he did so with the knowledge that he had lived a life that was truly, deeply, and authentically real. He was Michael Bennett, a man who had lost everything and found the world. This is the story of a man who chose to love, a woman who chose to stay, and a family that chose to be whole. It is a story of redemption, resilience, and the enduring power of the human heart. And it is a story that reminds us all that the most important things in life are the ones we choose to keep. The rain in Seattle continues to fall, a steady, rhythmic pulse that echoes the heartbeat of a city that is always changing, always evolving. But for those who know the story of Michael Bennett, the rain is a reminder of a man who found the truth in the storm and built a life that was as solid as the earth itself. He was a man of choice, a man of heart, and a man who finally knew what it meant to be home.